You still think that 401k is the best place to be parking your money?
You are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees. Here on Wealth Talks, you've probably heard us talk about 401k plans, and you may know that we're not the biggest fans of these plans because of the way that they lock money away from you for most of your life, and the investment options can be limited. There are fees, though, and taxes and penalties. When and however you go to use the money, you're going to encounter some or all of these factors.
And really all a 401k does is give you a compounding annual rate of return. It never allows you to create the real wealth that Sean Tolley was talking about in his article in Fortune magazine in 1993, where the use of your money and being able to recover the interest that would normally be spent when using someone else's money like that. Mm-hmm. That's where the real wealth starts to be created. And companies like Coca-Cola, AT&T, Briggs & Stratton, and other companies that followed his advice really proved that to be true. And he called that concept economic value added. And a 401k limits your ability to add any economic value.
Very much so. It's very much a put it away, set it, forget it, and hope it's there in the future.
It is.
But if that was not enough of a reason for you to consider, where you're keeping your money, there's a new rule that's being proposed that may change 401ks even more.
It's not only proposed, it has been initiated. Now it just has to be approved within the next 60 days. It will be. And this bill this statement, this change in the 401k rules, will require the managers of 401ks to invest in what are called ESG schemes. An ESG scheme means that these people are going to have to look at environmental, social, and corporate governance factors. That's where the ESG comes from.
Okay, environmental, social, governance. Okay.
The only problem is that already we know that these ESG markets have peaked, according to the research. And yet managers charge more fees to place funds into these ESG investments. So that means you're guaranteed you will earn less in your 401k contributions.
And this is interesting because, 401k investment selections within a 401k can be limited to various packages that are put together by an investment advisor on the plan. And so these packaged investments, basically what this rule is saying here is that the advisor who puts these packages together is going to have to consider these when selecting the investment. So they can't just go after the returns that they believe are going to be best for the clients, but now they have to consider, or for the participants of the plan, now they have to consider these corporate governance factors in addition to just the returns that are going to be earned. So even if returns are lower, they're going to have to include some of these options and plan investments.
Yes, and this could include investing in movements like Antifa or BLM or any of the other social movements that we've seen uprising in the last couple of years that are really producing nothing but destroying the economy to begin with. Now, this will affect 150 million employees.
Wow.
And over $10 trillion of assets. Now, if all those 150 million employees start earning less, that's going to exacerbate the fact that already Americans don't have enough money saved to last their full retirement.
Right.
And Bloomberg and others have reported this multiple times that Americans really are outliving their retirement savings account, their 401k, their IRAs, whatnot, in about 10 years. The problem is we're living 18 to 20 years in retirement. And so for the last 8 to 10 years of someone's retirement, they're dependent on Social Security, which, by the way, now is looking like it's going to go insolvent 1 year earlier in 2034 instead of 2035.
Well, there's nothing new under the sun. This reminds me of what is called Willie Sutton's Law. Nelson Nash mentioned this in his book, Becoming Your Own Banker. Willie Sutton was a bank robber. And when people asked him why he kept robbing the banks, he said, well, that's where they keep the money. And so Willie Sutton's Law is basically formulated wherever there is an accumulation of wealth, someone is going to try to steal it. And it doesn't matter whether it's in 401ks, whether it's in other places that are supposed to be safe and secure in this country, in this environment. Wherever wealth is accumulated, people are going to try and get a piece of that pie.
Of course, Wall Street is jumping up and down about this new rule because that just means more money is going to come into all their money managers that are managing these 401ks because the fees are much higher on these management costs.
On the ESG type
on the
funds.
ESG funds. So, people that say that the Biden administration is anti-Wall Street and anti-corporation just haven't looked deep enough. They have not discerned the fact that there has been a switch that's taken place in this country, that the Democrats who always claim to be for the poor, for the middle class, are no longer poor and middle class representation, providing that for those people. They are looking after number one, they're in power, and they want to stay there.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's another factor that's working against people here, and that is, when they're looking at investing, most investment advisors, when they look at a client and they say, "Oh, this client is having a shortfall. They're not going to necessarily have enough," or we're in an environment with low returns, they're going to have to try and take more risk, trying to get a higher return, trying to get to where they want, where that client wants to be, and so this is supporting these ESG funds for every 401k plan. That's going to take a toll when it comes to when it comes time even to taking professional advice on what investments to take, because the advice is going to be slanted toward taking more risk to begin with.
Well, it comes to the point where regulations actually make it very hard for anyone to do an honest job. And that's one of the reasons that we like to work with independent companies that are regulated on the state level, which is really something our founding fathers really pushed, that we are these United States, not the United States. Mm-hmm. It's these United States that came together to have the protection that the federal government can provide for our borders and for enforcing certain laws that would cross state boundaries. The rest of this was supposed to be left up to the states. Each state now regulates life insurance. And so that's one of the reasons that Nelson Nash so adamantly supported the idea of using life insurance as a place to park our revenues, because it's like-minded people in a community, in a state, that are joining together so that they can leverage their funds and produce a better than average return of it on their money, while protecting ourselves from this type of regulation that comes down from a big central government that doesn't have a clue what you or your neighbor need.
Yeah. And so instead of just going after the mainstream, financial vehicles that everyone else is using, it's time to consider some vehicles that are controlled at the state level, that give you more control over your money so that you can use it along the way. Just the other day, the inflation data was updated. It's they're saying that inflation is now at the highest point since 1990, but they've taken some things out of figuring that inflation as well. I don't remember exactly what elements that they took out, but it seems like it was some major items like groceries and gasoline even.
Well, the government figures inflation different than you and I do. We go to the store and we say, "Oh my, I'm paying $3.90 a gallon for gasoline here at the place I've always bought gas, and now I'm going to have to go clear across town to get gas at this place that's still selling it for $3.70, and now I have to figure out, is that 20 cents going to be worth it?" All the government does when they look at that is say, "Oh, you made the decision to buy gas at $3.70, so your cost of living really didn't go up." They do the same thing with a steak. Recently I just bought a steak for one of my daughters because we were going to be out of town. She's going to be here. The steak cost over $17. A year ago, I could have bought that same steak for under $7.
Wow.
Now, what the government does is says, oh, they're not buying steak anymore. Well, what are they buying? Oh, they're buying ground beef. Ground beef is only, three. They actually decreased their cost of living because they were buying steak and eating it. Now they're only eating ground beef.
So that's all that
there
gets
really
counted
hasn't
to
been
inflation
enough
data.
There really hasn't been any inflation here. So that's the way they figure inflation when they're poking these numbers at us. When we really look at what inflation is, it is already raging much higher than the Jimmy Carter era in the 70s that drove the high interest rates of the 80s.
Yeah.
So, like Nelson always said, the world is full of lies, 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 lies.
Yeah, we talked
have
about that on a recent podcast.
And we have to discern what the truth is. We can't just listen to these talking heads like we've talked about because they're going to feed you the propaganda the government is sending out.
Yeah. So inflation, you can make the argument that inflation affects everybody, and it does. It affects families, and it takes money that you have saved or thought you saved, and it devalues it without you seeing a lesser dollar amount because it just simply doesn't buy as much.
However, it does not affect the people that get the money the Fed prints first as much as it affects us. It makes
Right,
them wealthier because
differing
they're buying
degrees.
things before everyone realizes, wait a second, this dollar isn't worth what it used to be.
That's right.
Okay.
And so inflation, people say, well, I can't avoid it, so why not go along with it? I can't do it, so just go along with it. Because after all, everything that you do in the financial world is compared to what everyone else is doing. And to a certain degree, that's true. But there are some measures that we can use to counteract inflation. That's by being able to use our money multiple times while we're saving it for the future.
That's correct. It's the flow of money that creates wealth as long as that control is managed wisely. Rabbi Lapin talks about blood and money being the same word in the Hebrew language because they do the same thing in their own environment. If you don't control your blood pressure or your blood flow, all of your blood is going to go to your ankles and your feet, and you'll die a slow and treacherous death. Mm-hmm. If you don't control the inflationary process in your life that is happening all around us by being able to spend your money more than once and over again, you'll die from inflation financially. The other way is that if you cut your wrists, you're going to bleed to death very rapidly unless you get emergency care. And this is happening with Americans because $122 billion was spent on credit card interest payments alone in 2019. That is bleeding to death rapidly. And unless they get some emergency help financially, they're going to financially bleed to death very rapidly. So this is what we talk about. This is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. This is why we use participating whole life insurance as a place to keep your money so that you can use it multiple times and not lose the growth that the policy provides.
That's right. So yes, we're facing inflation. Yes, there are some serious fallout issues from it. Yes, there is something that you can do about it to offset it, to work against it. You never give in to it.
Yes.
Never give in to it.
And not chase fads just because someone says that this is a good place to park your money. History has told us that the money flows to where the most creative ideas are occurring. When government steps in and forces you to put your money any place, you can know that that's probably going to be a dead end.
There you go. So as you're thinking about how to manage your money, remember that whatever you do in the financial world is compared to what everyone else is doing. So if everyone else is going with the flow and you're working against it, then whatever happens, you're going to be in a better position, even if it's with experience on the other end. You're going to be in a better position than the people who are just going with the flow. Take responsibility, take the actions that you need to learn what's going on, to work and to manage your money the best that you can do. And finally, I think it's worthwhile to mention that you should do this in a spirit of faith.
Oh, absolutely.
In the future, and not fear of what's going to happen. Nothing
works if we do it in the state of fear. Even the old fire and brimstone sermons of the Great Awakenings really didn't produce the results because many of those people were awakened 4 or 5 times a year because they were afraid of hellfire coming down. We do it because of faith. The future can be better if we do this today.
Mm-hmm. Yes, or that we're building a future within, whatever future is going to be applied. So yes, I always think of this story we've talked about on the podcast before, the story of Jeremiah 32. He was in prison. The people were about to go into captivity, be taken away in captivity to Babylon, and the Lord told him to buy a piece of land from his cousin.
Buy a piece of land and record the deed, because that is the future. And you may not be there to enjoy that future. We don't know the future, but you very well could be. So take the actions as if. And if you're not there, then the posterity that you leave will make the world a better place tomorrow.
That's right. So you are listening to Wealth Talks with the McPhees, a resource that may be of help to you as you're in this journey of learning to be discerning with your finances and managing your money wisely. Check out the book, How to Build Sustainable Wealth. The first half of the book goes through problems that we're facing in our country, in the financial environment that many of us are operating in today. The second part goes through a solution, some tools and financial vehicles that you can use to fight back against what's happening in the financial picture at the individual level. And that's something that all of us can do. So you can get that book on our website, life-benefits.com, or give us a call at 702-660-7000. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be back next week on Wealth Talks.